York primary. Voting underway as Clinton and Trump look to cement frontrunner status. New York voting continued Tuesday in the most raucous nominating contest of an already wild presidential campaign season, with New York a coveted prize for Republican Donald Trump and Democrat Hillary Clinton, who anticipate wins tonight that will vault them closer to their party's nomination. Polls show Clinton and Trump leading by double-digit margins in a state with vastly diverse backdrops, from the riches of Wall Street and suburban Westchester County to the struggles of industrial cities upstate like Watervliet and Watertown. While the party frontrunners spent much of the day in New York, other candidates, Sen. Ted Cruz, Tex, and Ohio Gov. John Kasich on the GOP side and Sen. Bernie Sanders, VT, in the Democratic race, stumping for votes in Maryland and Pennsylvania, which will hold primaries next week. A big win for Trump would bring him closer to securing an outright majority of Republican delegates, an outcome that remains in jeopardy and has prompted Cruz to mount a spirited, methodical campaign to force a contested convention. Early exit poll results showed that Trump was poised for a commanding victory thanks to a predominantly conservative electorate that favors an outsider in the White House. But if Trump falls short of the needed delegates, a clear majority of New York Republican voters, 7 in 10, said the party should nominate the leading candidate regardless of whether they achieve an absolute majority of convention delegates. According to exit poll results reported by CNN, more than half of New York Republican voters consider themselves somewhat conservative, according to exit polls reported by CNN. If that stands throughout the evening, it would be higher than any state in this year's contests and shows Trump's likely support in the state. Most GOP primary voters, more than 6 in 10, said they want the next president to hail from outside the political establishment. If that figure holds, it would mark the highest level of support for a political outsider in Republican contests this year, according to CNN. A Clinton victory would provide momentum after a blitz of recent primary and caucus wins for Sanders. Unlike Trump, Clinton is so far ahead in the delegate count that it would be nearly impossible for Sanders to catch her. Roughly 4 in 10 New York Democratic primary voters are non-white, according to early exit poll data reported by ABC News, up slightly from 30% in the 2008 Democratic primary in the state. That apparent shift bodes well for Clinton if it holds through the night, as non-white voters have favored Clinton over Sanders by a 70 to 29% margin across earlier contests this year. Sanders has performed especially well among independent voters this year, and preliminary exit polling reported by ABC News found nearly 1/5 of the Democratic electorate identifying as independents, while up slightly from 12% in the 2008 primary. New York's current mark is below the 24% average in Democratic contests so far, probably due to the state's closed primary, where only party registrants can vote. Tuesday's vote also signaled stronger unity among Democrats than Republicans. At least 6 in 10 New York Democratic primary voters said they would definitely support either Clinton or Sanders as the party's nominee. According to preliminary exit poll data reported by ABC News, there's far less agreement among Republicans. About half said they would definitely support Trump, while roughly a quarter would support Cruz, and 3 in 10 would support Kasich. In New York City, officials announced plans to audit the Board of Elections, which conceded Tuesday that 125,000 Brooklyn voters had been purged from the voter rolls, and residents complained about problems at polling sites across the city. The next president of the United States could very easily be decided tonight, and yet the incompetence of the Board of Elections puts a cloud over these results. New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer told reporters as he announced plans for an audit. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio voiced support for the audit, saying he expected problems to be fixed in time for state and local primaries scheduled in June. Despite the troubles, Many New Yorkers celebrated their newfound relevance Tuesday, even if they have grown a bit weary of the barrage of ads on the airwaves in recent weeks. "It's nice. I feel like our vote usually doesn't count," said Sunita Ray, 41, who voted for Clinton in Midtown Manhattan. Still, she said she will not miss some aspects of the heated primary campaign. "The ads were a little annoying." Clinton cast her own vote in Chappaqua in suburban New York, where supporters had waited outside with signs and buttons. She later flew to Washington to address the North America's Building Trades Unions (NABTU) Legislative Conference, although she planned to end the day in New York City. Meanwhile, scores of onlookers gathered Tuesday morning outside Trump Tower to catch a glimpse of Trump as he left home to vote. They waved enthusiastically behind a barricade before the billionaire's motorcade took off down 56th Street. The sidewalks surrounding Central Synagogue in Manhattan, where Trump voted, were lined with supporters and some protesters. Someone asked Trump whom he intended to vote for. "Easy decision," he replied, smiling. The Sanders campaign has played down his prospects in New York, citing the state's closed primary. On a morning stroll around the block from the Times Square hotel where he was staying, Sanders ran into Michael Cantalupo, 21, a local television host, who told Sanders that he had missed the October deadline to switch his unaffiliated voting status to Democratic. "This is the problem. Tell them," Sanders told Cantalupo, directing him to talk to more than a dozen reporters trailing the senator on his walk. Shortly afterward, he headed to Pennsylvania for 2 campaign stops. During his first, in Erie, he attacked Clinton's trade record. "It took me about 12 seconds to figure out that NAFTA was going to be a disaster for American workers," Sanders told the rally, referring to the Free Trade Pact involving the United States, Mexico and Canada that was approved during President Clinton's administration. In New York, Clinton has tailored her message to her tenure as the state's junior senator for 8 years, asking voters to remember the work she did on their behalf. But she has also sought to use Trump and New York's diversity to make a sweeping case that the primary, and the election as a whole, is about a choice between her vision for the future and Trump's divisive rhetoric. Like Sanders, Cruz is bracing for a loss in New York, polling behind not only Trump in recent surveys but also Kasich, whose only primary victory so far came in his home state. Cruz was scheduled to speak later Tuesday in Philadelphia and huddle afterward with dozens of Republicans running to serve as national convention delegates at the Cleveland convention. Kasich began the day Tuesday by canvassing the lunchtime crowd at Pittsburgh's original Oyster House, and was scheduled to campaign later in Annapolis and Bethesda. O'Keefe and Alperin reported from Washington. John Wagner in New York and Erie, Pennsylvania, Abby Phillip in New York, and Scott Clement, Angiran and Katie Zazima in Washington contributed to this report.